Well, thank you for taking the time. So I just want to kind of start it off with you've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and you've had multiple different ventures. And I guess give our listeners maybe a little bit of a background of how you became an entrepreneur, and walk us through the steps when you really thought and knew that you wanted to be your own boss.
Sure. Well, I think part of my reason for wanting to be an entrepreneur is because I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs and I never really thought about them as entrepreneurs, but my mom was an interior decorator, interior designer by degree and by trade, who then became a racehorse breeder. So she had her own business with racehorses, standing stallions and breeding racehorses. And my dad was a farmer. So both of them were always self-employed. And it it just was a part of the fabric of my life, if you will. And then graduating from college, I got a job and moved out to Minnesota, got a job at an investment firm, and met and married my husband, who was an entrepreneur. And
So
he
did you meet
came.
your husband at your job?
No, I actually met my husband visiting out here, visiting my cousin out here, and she introduced me to my husband. And he had just graduated from Bethel University, and he was doing all kinds of fun stuff that I didn't really care about at the time until we ended up getting married.
Now you
And
gotta care.
right, kind of matters then. But he and two brothers actually started a lighting retrofit business where they went in, and this was in the early 90s. They would go into industrial buildings and create, or excuse me, replace the lighting in those buildings with a more energy efficient coating on the back of the lighting fixture, and then a more energy efficient lighting ballast. And this, they manufactured the product and they installed it. And their business started from scratch, basically in Phil's, my husband's basement, or excuse me, bedroom. And then from there, within like 5 years, they were doing $20 million in revenue or thereabouts and had 250 employees. And these guys were like, 25, 26 years old.
Wow, some
And
huge exponential growth. When you met Phil, where in the life cycle of the business was it?
that's a good question. I think when I met Phil, it was 93, 94 New Year's Eve. And they started the business in 92. And they sold it in 97. So I don't know exactly where they were in growth. I mean, they were at one of their smaller offices. So they had gone from being in Phil's house, basically, to a small building in Roseville area, small rental space. And so they were still kind of in the infancy stages. I think maybe they had 75 employees, but I don't remember what they were doing in revenue because I didn't care at the time.
So, did you know that you were dating the business along with him, or did you kind of find that out afterwards?
No, I guess when I met Phil, he made it sound like it was just this really exciting, fast growing business. And I just took it for granted that that's exactly what it was. Well, then after we got married, more things started coming to the surface. And Phil was not the main owner. He was a small a small owner at that point in time. And there was kind of a group of guys that came together and started it. So it wasn't just Phil and these two brothers. There was some other guys too. But he just made it sound like they all had all these great, work parties, and they'd go off and go snowmobiling together, and they'd go visit clients, and they traveled all the time, and it just kind of was almost like sounded like a big party because they're these young kids running this business. And then after we got married, they started having cash flow issues, and mainly because they were growing so fast, and that kind of growth, maintaining cash flow with that kind of growth is hard for any business. And they had clients like Menards, and
Bigger
they
shops that can dictate the terms.
right, that's exactly what it was, Ryan. And so they ended up really kind of needing cash flow and capital. And so
So,
and there
what was
was
your involvement? Like, walk us through when you guys got married and he was running the business, what was your exposure to the business, exposure to the financial and the emotional side of it, and how did that progress?
You know, Gal, you're asking me all these things I haven't thought about for a while. It was kind of a lot of really extreme highs and really extreme lows. And I don't know what other people's experiences are with a business like that, and we were really young too. So, we were very naive, I would say. And there was just a lot happening fast for kids in their mid 20s, and a lot of big players, and then the guy that was the majority owner really has a good business sense, but he also was young too. And so my involvement, it was almost like a big family. Because these guys had all gone to college together, and a lot of their wives had gone to college together, and they all knew each other real well. And I came in as the outsider a little bit because I was from Michigan, and then I had also gone to school, outstate in Colorado, so I didn't know any of these guys, and so it was very emotional. It was like, things would happen, these big wins and, these big deals. And then the next thing you know, there's cash flow issues or, I don't remember, but lawsuits, whatever, things like that. So
was it just one big group of people that were just in charge of all progressing the business from a sales marketing standpoint, and then everybody kind of pitching in together for the operations and the finance?
No, it was organized. I mean, the key player did a good job at, the president did a good job, I think, at bringing in more experienced key players to run the business. Like they had a CFO. I say we because I think of it as our business, but I was not part of the ownership there per se. But there was a CEO, there's a controller, there was structure, there was an organization chart. My husband was VP of sales and marketing as a 25-year-old or whatever. And he had a team of salespeople. There was structure to it, definitely.
So what were the dynamics then? Walk us through with the multiple owners and the rapid growth. How did the things progress to the point where, from what you said, you guys walked through a pretty fast growth and then decided to sell sooner than a lot of businesses will that'll continue to go on with growth like that. Walk me through the conversation that your husband was having with his partners, and then how you saw the exposure to the emotional roller coaster, and what was the triggering event behind it?
The triggering event behind them deciding to sell the business was kind of two things, but I think the biggest thing, and this is a while ago, so it's hard to remember everything, but the biggest thing was cash flow and just having cash flow issues and needing to be able to deal with that in some way, shape, or form. And then the other triggering event was opportunity, because the industry was being deregulated, and there was opportunity as well. So I don't remember.
Opportunity from the potential buyers, or
or for them to sell.
Okay.
There was buyers, yes. And my husband there was three owners, one majority and two minor, and my husband was a minor owner. And he, I don't remember exactly when or why the decision was made, but I know that, they were finally ended up being approached by NSP, Northern States Power, who now, of course, is Excel. But they approached us to buy the business, or not us, that company. I think of us because, again, I think of myself.
So it was an external related. It was kind of just an offer out of the blue that was initiated by NSP.
Yeah. Yes.
Had your husband and you had any conversations at home about what it would look like and what you would do if you ever got an offer, or was it just kind of head down and keep trudging away?
Yes, head down, keep trudging away. It sounded really sexy and cool to get this offer, but until we saw it, we really didn't believe it, and we didn't make any big plans or anything. And but I will tell you though, once it happened, that's when things really changed, and that was an interesting process.
When you say things change, what do you mean by that?
So I don't know what happens to other people, but our experience was, and I think it has a lot to do with our backgrounds and our stage of life, but My husband grew up in a family business. I grew up in a family business, but different. I grew up as a farm kid, and you know, we always got the talk on the farm. You know, this we might lose the farm this year because it was, you know, tough. And so my dad got the farm, you know, more paid off. It was tough in the early years, and we always knew that. Whereas my husband grew up in a family business where his grandpa started a farm implement company, and it was really successful by the time he was born. And he was a part of the business over in Wisconsin all the time, but I don't feel like he ever had the fear factor. And so when we sold that manufacturing company and got an influx of cash as 27-year-olds, I'll be honest with you, the first thing we thought of is, you know, what trip are we going to go on? What trip's on our bucket list? So we went on a trip to Ireland, and I went fox hunting in Ireland. And
Fox hunting, huh?
yeah, yeah, exactly. It was on my bucket list. My husband bought a Harley, and it was on his bucket list. And we bought some hunting property over in Wisconsin, and we invested a lot of it. But
What do the rest of your friends think when you guys are off, kind of splurging after your hard-earned reward?
I will tell you, Ryan, honestly, I would not wish that time back in our lives because I feel like it changed me and it changed friendships with some of our friends, legitimately so. I mean, you know, how can you as a struggling 27-year-old not have mixed emotions about your friends that suddenly come into a lot of cash? I mean, it was it was different. I mean, I definitely think some of our relationships were strained, but and I don't think we made the wisest choices. But that's when we also, you know, felt like we had the Midas touch a little bit. And my husband, I think, would be the first to admit that he kind of felt that way because he grew up in a family business. The first business right out of college, he you know, was involved in, did well, and he felt like, oh well, this is just going to continue to happen. And so I'm just going to march right into the next endeavor, and I'm sure it'll go well.
So how long between, as far as the time frame? So you got the offer from NSP.
Mm-hmm.
How long between that and the actual sale and writing of the papers?
Pretty quickly. I think it was maybe 2, 3 months. So I want to say, I remember we went to Hawaii in, I think it was November of 1997 on a work trip where a company paid for us to go to the Ritz-Carlton in Hawaii for a week. And then my husband and his two business partners had to leave the trip early to go home and like ink the deal. And so I think it was right around the holidays in 1997 that everything kind of was finalized.
So what was the dialogue between you and Phil over those couple months where you knew that you were, I mean, I'm assuming you probably, you know, reversed into some of the numbers of what kind of cash you're going to be getting afterwards, and what were some of the conversations about plans afterwards or next ventures? Or, I mean, obviously you decided to buy a Harley and go out to Ireland, but what were some of the conversations that you guys had?
Well, originally he was supposed to stay on at NSP. Well, NSP bought this little company up and then changed the name, and Phil was supposed to stay on and stay working there. And so we really didn't have a lot of discussions about what we were going to do next because I was employed at the time and he was theoretically employed. You know, they asked him to stay on, and you know, part of his contract was that he would stay on for a period of time and then his role would not change. Well, then he ended up in a role where he was supervising some data entry individuals, and he felt at the time that this is maybe 3 or 4 months into it, that was a demotion in his mind from what he was doing before. So
A little bit different than VP of marketing.
Yeah, well, VP of sales.
Yeah.
And so he went ahead and resigned. And he then, and this is, I'm not proud to admit, this is where we were in our life then, he filed suit against NSP for demotion or violation of contract.
Was there an earnout tied to it where there was a portion of the money that he was paid afterwards?
No, there wasn't. So he had just been given the chunk of money when they sold the company, but they had written in the contract that they wanted him to stay. And I think that I think that if he would have stayed, it probably would have been just fine. But his pride was injured, and I do believe that they did violate the contract, but that was debatable, of course. And so we used Winthrop and Weinstein, I want to say, to file suit against NSP. And oh my gosh, that was what I more vividly remember, Ryan, which was scary. And going up against NSP in court. And, apparently our attorneys felt like we had a really good case, but then one of the other partners had a lawsuit, decided to file suit against NSP for something else. And NSP just got fed up and said, you know what, if you guys don't drop all your frivolous lawsuits, we're going to rescind the deal. And it scared us, and so we dropped everything. But I think at the time, we spent $50,000 on law fees alone in like that first 3 or 4 months, just out of pride. You know what I mean? Like, how dare you? And that was frightening to me personally, but my husband felt like he had a real issue. So when that was kind of dropped and swept under the rug, he needed to have a new career, and that was a very stressful time. I remember just being like, oh my gosh, what is he going to do?
Did he have any idea, or did you have any idea how it was going to go?
No, I was very frightened personally. My husband was very optimistic that he'd, knock the ball out of the park again. So he got his real estate license. He was going to go develop land. Then he got his Series 7 license and decided he wanted to be a financial advisor, because we had good friends that were developing land and making big money, and we had good friends that were successful financial advisors. So he felt like there's no reason why he couldn't do both of those things at the same time. So
I was going to say, how does the dialogue between you and Phil and the rest of your friends is, everybody's kind of getting into their career, really identifying themselves with where their companies are at and where their career paths are going. So how does that change the dialogue with the people you're hanging out with?
I think the people that we were hanging out with at the time were entrepreneurial as well. So I think a lot of them kind of shared the optimism. We really didn't have a lot of friends that weren't entrepreneurial that I recall. Our good friends have always kind of, at least at that period of time, were building their own business. Looking for the next big deal. Yeah, kind of. And they're just building their own business. And so it was kind of the culture that we lived in, and that we, the friendships that we had, which is probably a large part of why I think my husband felt like, why not? Let's just go, do another business. And the second business that we did was started purely out of, how do you want to say it? It was not well thought out. It was out of just seeing an opportunity and taking it.
More of a reason to do something?
Yeah, and I was in the business already as a licensed sales assistant, and I was happy with what I did. And so I think my husband thought, well, this will be an opportunity for us to work together, and I can sell financial advisory products or whatever, and Kristy can help me build this business. And so I felt like whatever makes my husband happy, I'm going to be a part of. So I just jumped on that and went right along with helping him with that business.
So the overall goal of starting the business, or was it more to be happy and work together? What was real?
For me, it was to be happy and to work together. For my husband, there was a quantifiable goal all the time. Okay. And originally out of the gates, he was very successful at making those goals for the most part right away. But for those of you that have built a business from scratch, especially a service-related business, it's very challenging. And I don't think he realized how challenging and stressful it is to be a business owner on your own. I mean, yeah, I was there, but it was not my dream. It was his dream. And
how did that affect everything at home?
We worked together pretty well. And I worked really hard at supporting him at that point in time, although I kind of started to see the writing on the wall fairly quickly, in that I started to see that we owned that business for 7 years. So we owned the first business for 5 or 6 years. We owned the second business for 7 years. We sold both businesses. one at an incredible gain and one at an incredible loss. And I will tell you that the second business, the difference is it was almost like the rebound relationship, Ryan, where, you have your first really successful, relationship, and you lose that relationship and you jump into the next one too quickly without really analyzing what went well, what didn't go so well with the first relationship. And I would say that is a very accurate depiction of what happened with us in the second business. We just rebound right into it.
And how did that affect you? Because you were really involved with your husband and growth of a company, and then struggling, and you no longer got the Midas touch. How does that affect you, and how did you come to the conclusion that it was time to release or move on?
So there's very few things in life that I can say that I've done well. Life is a series of personal successes and challenges and regrets. But one of the things I had to work extremely hard at during that period of time is not telling my husband that we needed to sell the business, but letting my husband uncover that for himself. Because I do believe that it would have really seriously impacted our marriage if I would have been the one to tell him the business needed to be sold.
So where were you guys when he came to the realization, and you had already obviously been in that place mentally and had already been there? So where were you, and how did the conversation go between you two?
Oh, well, this is after some counseling and everything during this time, because my husband was anxious about the business, but he was kind of hiding decisions from me at that point in time and not telling me, kind of the truth about, his successes or lack of successes in the business. And then he would also tap into, taking a loan, like the property I mentioned out in Wisconsin. He mortgaged it to pay for some stuff in the business and didn't tell me.
What do you think? There was some pride going on there?
Oh, yes. And so, we were dealing with some issues, and I was letting my husband work it out, because even though I would, literally get in my car and drive away from the house and call my best friend and cry, like, I don't know how I can take this any longer, because we were burning through money right and left. The business, if you looked at it from the outside, looked successful, but we were spending so much money on marketing and making all kinds of investments into all kinds of marketing, stuff that worked, but then a lot of stuff that didn't. And it was scaring me to death as we kept burning through all these, assets and investments that we had just obtained through selling the first business. We were burning through all this right and left. And I will attribute it all to the fact that we did not do our homework ahead of time on what to do with yourself when, and I would say for us, you sell one business and then what you want to do with your life after that. I truly believe that if we would have done some kind of career coaching or some kind of assessment at that point in our life, it would have really, really helped us, both of us, because we were both in the wrong positions, but we didn't. So we just stubbornly went ahead and burned that business to the ground, more or less, and almost our marriage. I mean,
But it sounds like you successfully have made the bridge after. I mean, you sold the business, so you didn't file bankruptcy or shut the doors. You sold what was left to a different firm. I'm assuming, or
we did. I mean, we did well by our clients. We transitioned the business. We found an advisor that we trusted, that we felt would do a good job for our clients. We sold the business to that advisor, and Phil stayed on for a period of time to have personal meetings and introductory meetings and transition meetings, whatever, to the new advisor. And so the clients did well, and we did not sell the business for much. Little did we know it was probably worth a lot more, but we just were anxious to kind of move on.
So it was between emotionally and financially, just the triggering event between those two just kind of came to a head, and Phil came to the realization himself, or after?
He did. No, he came to the realization that we needed to sell the business on his own. And it was, let me think about it, it was spring of 2005.
So
Uh,
how was it different after the second business you guys had sold? What was the atmosphere between you two and your perspective on life and what was next? Explain the difference between the first time and the second time.
well, I think the first time was sort of like winning the lottery. Even though I know that Phil worked hard in that first business, we sold that business and essentially won the lottery. And I think that may be a similar case with other people that sell a business and suddenly have a large influx of cash. And while you've worked very hard to earn it, you haven't necessarily saved all that money month in, month out, month in, month out. It just suddenly gets given to you. And when that happens, I think that there's very few people that can successfully navigate that without lots of coaching. And we got zero coaching or zero, financial advice. We had no trusted advisors really. And why did we need, I was a registered representative, even though I wasn't, writing financial plans for people. I felt like I knew enough and just a lot of pride. The second one was very humbling. And yet, I will tell you that once we sold the second one, even though we were financially in a pretty rotten spot, I felt so relieved, Ryan. I can't even tell you. I was ready to just move on. My husband was pretty defeated. I was pretty optimistic. And I felt like at least now we can start building instead of, for the last 7 years, we'd just been burning through cash. And I was looking forward to, even though we were in a hole financially, we did not file bankruptcy, but we definitely had, some business debt. I felt like now we can start to move forward again. So that was the spring of 2005. And it took my husband quite a while. I would say it took him to recover from that experience up until April 18th of 2011.
So that's a long period of time. What were some of the biggest challenges that he was struggling with that, and how did you navigate those challenges differently?
That's a very complex question because, and I have permission to share this, but my husband during that time became a secret alcoholic, and I did not know it. So he compensated with his issues around those two events by drinking, and kind of just became a bigger and bigger problem until he went into recovery. And I found out shortly before April 18th, 2011, that he was an alcoholic. He was a functioning alcoholic, and I didn't know it.
So did he
And
jump into another career that this was able to get kind of hidden, or was it more kind of wandering around? What was some of the things that filled his time that were kind of...
Well, it's interesting, Ryan, because so what happened after we sold the financial advisory business is he actually got hired back to the business that he sold, the manufacturing business that he sold to NSP. NSP got bought out by Excel. And when Excel bought out NSP, they sold off this little manufacturing business again. While we were off doing our own thing with the financial planning business. Some other people bought back this lighting manufacturing company, and then when we sold our financial advisory business, they hired Phil back with the potential of key employee ownership. So he went back into the manufacturing business in the sales, kind of like what he had before.
Second nature stuff that's easy to kind of wake up and do.
And also very optimistic that he was going to be an owner again of the company that had started in his bedroom back in 1992, and that never materialized. And the resentment just built, and the negative attitude, just beating himself up over failures that he thought, he had created in his own life, and that just became a vicious cycle. And then it all came to a head when he went into treatment on April 18th, 2011. So
So you're obviously handled things a lot differently. What were some of the things that you did to contribute to your optimism and your outlook? Because you've now own your own business as well. So you took a different path that's dramatically different. What were some of the things that you think helped you along that journey?
Well, thank you, Ryan. I would actually say that the biggest things that helped me, and now my husband has done the same thing. So he is in a completely different place now and doing very, very well. But what I did is I tried to do first a lot of self analyzing, like, what's going well in my life, what's not going well, professionally and personally, and tried to take an inventory of myself and my strengths. And then I went to a couple different career counselors. I'm a big proponent of coaching and, using people to coach me in areas of my life that I'm not strong in. And I wasn't seeing the forest for the trees in my own life in terms of what my strengths were. So I think the initiating factor in even starting down that road was I went to a class at our church, which is entitled GPS, Gifts, Passions, Strengths, just to help you figure out where you should volunteer at church. And when I did that, I learned that I have some pretty strong relationship and influencing strengths. And I thought to myself, my gosh, I'm not using these at all.
So that was your biggest insight that one of the kind of epiphany aha moments?
Yeah, I think so. And it wasn't the aha moment, but it was one of them. And then from there, I went back into the path that I knew best, which is financial services. And I helped a different financial ensemble start a business from scratch in Minnesota. They had a business going successfully in Charleston, South Carolina, but they wanted a branch in Minnesota. And I literally found an ad on Craigslist when I was going through this self-discovery process, and I called on the ad, and they had a meeting, and they hired me to do business development for them, and I did it really well. I mean, I was very successful for them, built a strong practice here in Minnesota, and they wanted me to come on as a full-fledged advisor. And this is my second big self-exploration moment, which was I wanted nothing to do with becoming a full-service advisor. And I was trying really hard to figure out, well, if I'm so good with people and I enjoy helping people, why do I not want to be a financial advisor? If everybody that meets me when they see me in the business thinks I should be, well, then when I did the Strength Finder personality assessment again, I realized, and I took it where you get the full report, you get all 34 strengths in order instead of just your top 5. I looked at my bottom strengths, and some of my bottom strengths were the exact strengths I would need to be a financial advisor, which are analytical strengths, intellection strengths, where you like to think things through, you're very detailed, maximizer, like a lot of these strengths where, I would need those if I was going to be looking at portfolios, looking at financial plans all the time, keeping up on tax updates. And they were all my bottom strengths. And it just kind of took the pressure off, like, you know what, this is not where I belong. So then I went in from there. I continued meeting with different business coaches here and there, and, took some classes on your purposeful life and things like that. And went to work for a marketing firm in St. Paul for 3.5 years after I left that financial advisory firm.
So after you get your strengths, I mean, what was there certain criteria that you were looking for in a job? I mean,
Yes.
is it a specific industry, or were there certain things that you were, because obviously you're getting coaching from these people, and I'm assuming they're helping you identify where you find your passion and purpose, or your sense of, I don't know, identity.
Yes. So anytime you work with another professional, and you know this, Ryan, that, you can receive coaching, whether it's, a personal fitness trainer, whether it's a business coach, a marketing coach, whatever it is, you can get all the coaching in the world, but if you don't do the homework that they give you, or you don't do your own work, it's going to amount to nothing. And so when I was going through this process, I did my own work. And I remember sitting at my kitchen table and taking little tests on my laptop. I took the DISC test on my own. I took different tests, and then I'd read about you might like these careers. And I remember real estate agent was one that would come up high for me all the time. And so I pursued that for a little while. I went and did informational interviews and I talked to different people, and I just, it wasn't the right fit for me. So, marketing seemed like a really good fit for me. And I definitely knew I was good at sales. So that's kind of what led me into finding this opening at this marketing agency. And I did that for 3.5 years and eventually left there. And this was the catalyst, I think, that led to me finally realizing that I needed to be an entrepreneur, which was, I was selling for this marketing agency, and I really respected them and I really believed in what I was selling. And then things started to shift, and I didn't respect the business owners as much anymore for various different reasons. And I didn't believe in what they were asking me to sell, and I just couldn't sell anymore. I was just, I was like, look, I can't, I'm authentic. That's who I am. I'm an open book, and I can't go into a meeting and say that people should spend $50,000 on their brand messaging. I can't do that in good conscience. And so I ended up leaving there. And when I left there, I did not have another job lined up. And now we're still financially digging out of this hole.
I was going to say, so you...
I took a big risk.
Well, and that's so I'm curious, because when you say you went up and you looked at real estate, you were looking at all these different companies, all these different industries. That's a lot of work, and that's emotionally draining. So my question for you is, so to wake up every day and continue to explore all those different options, where was the fire, the motivation coming from? Because it would have been super easy for you to just get plugged in at another investment banking firm or something where you got a job that's stable, especially after two major up and down roller coasters like you've been through. So where do you attribute the fire or the motivation to explore all the different options that you did?
Oh, that is really a good question, Ryan. And I have coached a lot of people through this same process. And I think your sense of motivation is equivalent to two things. Your financial situation is one thing that's always going to be putting pressure on you to figure it out. And secondly, your level of frustration or discontentment with your current situation. And I would say for me, I've never been super financially motivated. So for me, it was really my level of discontentment and frustration. And yes, I had financial pressure because of the failure of our second business, but that was not it alone. It was certainly more of, I want to do something that I'm an emotional person. And because I think a lot of entrepreneurs are emotional. I could be wrong about that, but I would say a lot of entrepreneurs are very emotional. And so I have to be able to get up in the morning and do something that I'm passionate about, or it's not going to be worth it.
So that is your definition.
That was
the opposite of discontent is your passion?
Now it is. Like, now I get up every day and I'm really, really passionate about helping the people that I work with in our business. That's what gets me up in the day, is, gets me fired up, is, oh, I get to talk to so-and-so today. And I'm really excited because we're really helping them grow their business. Whereas, before, I was just a stay-at-home mom for a period of time, and I was very discontent. Plus, we had financial pressures, and I was like, man, I got to figure this out because I'm really unhappy in life. I love being a mom, but I don't like being a full-time stay-at-home mom. And so I was really, really driven to there. I knew there was more to life. And so that's what really drove me to just keep pushing it, until I figured out what I was put on this earth to do, Ryan. Honestly, I mean, I just kept pushing through, and
So walk me through that epiphany that you figured out what you're supposed to do on this earth, because that's something I think everybody's in search for.
Well, I think really I do this all the time in my role now with what I do with my business, but I am super, super, super passionate now about helping people discover how they're hardwired naturally. And I feel like that was when my epiphany hit. So I was starting to really uncover how I was hardwired. I was learning and taking notes on what I was not good at and what my weaknesses are, but I was also starting to really take notice of and really remember the things that made me feel really good and gave me energy.
What were some of the steps or resources that you used to do that?
Well, I would definitely say the Strength Finder. by the Gallup organization was helpful for me, and really not just taking the test and getting the results, but actually really thinking through the results, the strengths that I had that were my natural, top strengths, and reading through the descriptions and what often people do when they have those top strengths, meaning career wise. And there's no place out there that's going to give you the golden ticket of what you need to do. So you have to kind of take notes on yourself. Like, okay, I remember that woo is one of my top strengths. That means I really like to meet new people and make small talk. Communication is one of my top strengths. That means that I find it easy to put my thoughts into words. And so it just, like, by reading through those strengths that were my top strengths, I would start to just remember, well, you have value, Kristy, and you have things to offer other people. So, offer this world. Let's start to really pay attention to that. And the things that really I wasn't good at, and I think about, okay, now who can I partner with that is good at the things that I'm not good at? So fast forwarding, Ryan, to when I left that marketing firm where I was the salesperson, and I left it with no second job lined up, that took a lot of courage. And the reason why I did it is because I sought out a career coach by the name of Beth Wellesley from Promoting Brilliance. And she and I met before I left, and I kind of needed her to validate my frustrations with my current situation. And she said, yes, it's a situation that if you continue in, it's just going to continue to beat down on your confidence. And your confidence in your career is your biggest asset. Your confidence in yourself, I should say, is your biggest asset. And so she's like, you need to make a change sooner than later, or you're just going to continue to beat down on yourself. And it's going to be harder and harder and harder to make a change. So she also knew my strengths, and she knew I am a pretty hard driver. And she said, you know what? I promise you, if you quit that role and you take 2 weeks off to just live and just rest and recover, you're going to hit the ground running in 2 weeks from now, and you're going to be able to just knock the ball out of the park. And I did not believe her, Ryan, until she said it to me maybe 3 times over a period of about 2 months. And finally, I just was like, you know what? I got to take the leap. And I did it.
And the leap meaning you don't know.
Quit the job. We didn't have the money. We did not have the resources for me to just quit a job. And I just said to myself, you know what? Sometimes you've got to take a risk. And this is probably what helped me also see that I was born to be an entrepreneur, because I was like willing to take that risk and follow her instructions. And she was exactly right. Like, I took 2 weeks off. I remember sitting in the backyard with my kids and watching them swim in the pool. And I just was like, this is so great. Because I didn't realize how burnt out and frustrated I was. And so after 2 weeks, then I had a big garage sale, cleaned out my house, raised enough money to pay for some gas and go back to Michigan for a week and visit my family. And when I came back from that, I was fired up to go make something happen. I went on some interviews, a lot of interviews. I networked up a storm, and I kept my eyes open for, what do I want to do? Like, do I want to go work for somebody else? And I kind of really didn't think I did, but that's all I kind of thought I was, capable of doing.
So how did you decide to actually start your own company then?
Well, one of my friends that was really, really, really devoted to helping me find another job, if you will, was Terry Wheeler. And Terry just was meeting with me almost weekly, like, okay, I know so-and-so, why don't I introduce you to them, and let's see if they're hiring. And she got me a couple interviews, and she prepped me for some interviews, and she was just really, really good at supporting me. And she had this great business, professional services marketing, and she'd been doing it for a while, and she was having to kind of reboot where she was in her business because she had taken a turn in her business that didn't work out. And so she was kind of having to start over a little bit in her business. And so I was encouraging her too, because I just thought the world of her. And one day I just looked across the table at her during lunch, and I was just getting ready to leave and go to yet another interview. And I said to her, I'm like, someday I'd really like to work with you. And she's like, oh, that'd be so fun. And I said, I want to be in marketing like you and do marketing coaching and consulting. And she's like, oh, that'd be great. And after I said that, about a week later, I just thought, you know what, that's what I need to do. So I called Terry up. I remember calling her up on June 10th. 2011. Might have been after that, but called her up on a Friday and I said, okay, I really think I want to work with you. And she's like, oh my gosh, that'd be great. And she sent me a big long email that night and about all the possibilities. And she had the business for 15 years and never had a business partner. And she thought I'd be the perfect fit. And we went
Did
through then.
that job mesh up with the criteria that you and Beth had put together?
Yes. And it wasn't just Beth. I still have a huge notebook of all these notes I had taken about myself over the last like 5 years. This was not at all a one-time thing. This was like a building, working through things process. But I had taken notes. I had notebooks. I had folders on myself. And so when this opportunity kind of presented itself organically, it hit on every cylinder for me. I really was like, this is it. And there was some challenges. Like Terry and I, we did not sign on the dotted line immediately. So that was mid-June. Terry and I did pre-business, like premarital counseling. We did pre-business partnership counseling with a few different advisors. One was a strength finder coach. She looked at both of our strengths and she talked to us about how they'd work well together, how they'd maybe not work so well together. We did have opposite strengths. We do have opposite strengths. We talked about values. We talked about a ton of what if this happens? What if that happens? A lot of scenarios.
What were some of your non-negotiables as you're walking into your third business?
Yeah, good. That's another really good question, Ryan. A non-negotiable for me was the values, because part of what I got disillusioned with previous employers / business owners that I'd been involved with were not having the same values. So our values in business needed to be aligned, and we had to talk through our values. So I think that why Terry and I have such a wonderful partnership now is because we did all that legwork, and we really talked through values. We talked through money. We have been very upfront from day one about the splits that we have as business partners. We've been very upfront about how we're going to treat people that work with us, how we're going to treat our clients. We talked through all kinds of, I think we addressed a lot of really scary scenarios, and talk through all kind of, like in marriage, it's kind of taboo to talk about sex sometimes. Like in business, sometimes it's really taboo or hard to talk about money. And we did that from day one. We talked about all the yucky stuff first, and it's just always been on the table. But I think the core thing, Ryan, really is the values piece, because in going back to what, didn't work well in our previous business experiences jointly between Phil and I and other people was really the values and having your values aligned.
So having your values aligned, I think, is really important with your business, because then it becomes more of you, which I think, our listeners, the biggest thing that we think about is that the entrepreneur gets to paint their identity and their values and their beliefs through their business, and it becomes part of them. So describe your relationship with your business now compared to some of the other ones, and then how do you separate the two, and how do you make sure that there is some distinguishing differences between the two?
Well, I think that one of the things that Beth Wellesley has always said, that if you're going to work with somebody or for somebody, one of the key components that you have to have for that person is respect. And I would say that that's true for me personally, for business partners and clients. And when I start with a new client, for example, they're interviewing me, but I also am interviewing them as well, because I have to make sure that I respect my clients. Otherwise, I can't, back to that passion, if I can't respect them and I don't believe in them, then I can't get up in the morning and get excited about helping them. And so it's the same thing with business partners. I really, really respect my business partner. I really admire her, and I really like her in that order. I mean, it's respect first, admire, and then like. So those maturity and time and experience have really shown me that those are really key non-negotiables for me, because in our first business, There was some character flaws at the time in the main business owner, and they've really shown, up in that person now over time. In some of the next businesses, there's, that I've been involved in, there's been issues with, some character challenges that didn't, or values that didn't mesh with mine. And so it leads to discontentment, it leads to frustration.